The shrill alarm ripped through the silence. The Russian pilot's pulse spiked as the radar display suddenly went dark. In the freezing air near Alaska's border, an F-16 Viper seemed to appear from nowhere, slicing across the Russian formation so closely that the wake slammed into the cockpit of the Tu-95, shaking it hard. The pilot's finger hovered just above the launch control. One tiny movement and the situation could have erupted into a global catastrophe. Under crushing G-forces, with their chests tight and their vision beginning to blur, the Russian crew realized something terrifying. This was no routine patrol. They had been pulled into a brutal, high-stakes game of aerial deception, where one wrong move could change everything. As northern sea routes slowly opened, Moscow saw more than access to resources. It saw a weak point in NATO's defensive shield. Alaska was not chosen by chance. Russia launched the mission as a probing operation, designed not to locate bases whose positions were already known, but to pressure the United States into exposing its electronic warfare systems. What Russia wanted most were the hidden details: emergency frequency hopping patterns, backup radar networks, and silent systems kept offline in peacetime. To peel back that invisible layer of protection, the Kremlin staged an elaborate humanitarian emergency. At 8 o'clock, the dull Arctic sky was broken by a burst of radio static. Over the International Emergency Channel, a shaken voice cut through the noise. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 404, reporting Engine 3 on fire. Electrical system completely failed, navigation lost, requesting emergency assistance. It was the voice of the Tu-95 pilot. Russia was playing one of its riskiest moves, using international aviation law like a master key. By presenting the aircraft as a crippled giant in distress, Moscow was counting on American rescue protocols and basic humanitarian responsibility to override immediate interception procedures. The strategy was simple. If the United States accepted the emergency as genuine, the escorting Su-35 fighters would gain a reason to move closer to the coast under the cover of protecting a distressed aircraft. That alone would complicate any response. Coastal defense systems would hesitate. And even more importantly, any rescue effort would likely require the United States to activate guidance radars and emergency coordination channels. The moment those systems came online, the intelligence equipment aboard the Tu-95 could begin collecting priceless data: protected frequency ranges, signal behavior, and encryption patterns reserved for real emergencies. Russia did not need the exact location of an American command center. It needed the United States to break silence. But deep inside NORAD's command center within Cheyenne Mountain, the mood was even colder than the frozen world outside. American officers watched the main screen without reacting to the desperate calls. No panic, no rush. Then a brief order came down. Condition MCON Alpha, execute. Instead of lighting up the skies with rescue radar, the United States did the opposite. Active radar sites along Alaska's coast were shut down. Radio traffic dropped to complete silence. Electronically, America vanished. The Americans had chosen an unexpected response. They played dead. For the Russian pilots, the radar warning receivers suddenly went silent. No lock-ons, no sweeping signals, just a blank screen. It looked like success. Either the deception had worked, or the American systems had gone quiet under pressure. But that silence was misleading. In that same moment, the United States was seeing the situation with greater clarity than ever. They had switched to a passive tracking network. Instead of sending out radar waves that could be detected, this system relied on signals already filling the sky: FM broadcasts, radio transmissions, digital TV, even satellite communications like Starlink. As those signals bounced off the surface of the Russian aircraft, they revealed their positions without a single active emission. To the Russian crews, it felt like they were flying through empty space. In reality, every movement of the Tu-95 and its Su-35 escorts was being mapped in precise detail, reconstructed in real time on a 3D display inside the American command center. Inside the cockpit, the warning systems remained quiet. Too quiet. It created a false sense of safety, exactly what the trap relied on. Now think about it. Could this situation have ended very differently? If you don't think so, drop a 1 below. To push the situation further and force Russia to react, the U.S. Air Force made its move. From Eielson Air Force Base, a squadron of F-16 Vipers had already taken off, flying low along the terrain to stay hidden from detection. Once in position, they didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they deployed something unexpected. These weren't standard missiles. They were MALD-J units, decoy drones equipped with advanced electronic warfare systems. Designed to mimic real aircraft, they could replicate the radar signature of almost any platform. This time, they were programmed to imitate something far more intimidating. Suddenly, the Su-35 radar screens lit up, not with 1 or 2 contacts, but 12. All moving at extreme speed, all matching the signature of the F-22 Raptor, one of the most advanced fighters in existence. The effect was immediate. With ground systems completely silent and a swarm of what appeared to be F-22s closing in from nowhere, confusion took over. The Russian pilots couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. Every signal looked authentic. At 8:15, faced with what seemed like overwhelming force, survival instincts kicked in. The illusion of distress was dropped instantly. Moscow escalated. The Su-35s powered up their electronic warfare systems to full capacity. Two of the fighters broke formation, ignited afterburners, and surged to high speed in opposite directions, attempting a pincer maneuver. At the same time, their onboard jamming systems flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with powerful interference. Their goal was simple: overwhelm American sensors with noise and break any targeting capability. From their perspective, it made sense. If the enemy can't see you, they can't track you. But within seconds, it became clear that something had gone wrong. What was meant to create invisibility had done the opposite. To American systems, those jamming signals didn't hide the aircraft, they highlighted them. Like bright beacons in the dark, the emissions made the Su-35s stand out even more clearly. The U.S. immediately applied a time difference of arrival tracking method. By measuring the tiny differences in how long the signals took to reach multiple receivers, they could pinpoint the exact origin. Even a gap of a few billionths of a second was enough. With powerful computing systems processing the data, the result was precise. Within half a minute of activating their jamming systems, the Russian aircraft had effectively revealed their own positions with extreme accuracy. They hadn't blinded their opponent. They had announced exactly where they were. That's when the most decisive piece of the American strategy came into play. While Russia concentrated on land-based systems, one critical factor slipped past them. They weren't watching the ocean. Out in the rough, icy waters off Alaska, a silent presence had been waiting. The USS Jack H. Lucas DDG-125, a next-generation destroyer, finally stepped into action. Until that moment, it had remained completely quiet, drifting through the waves like a frozen giant. Then its radar came alive. Equipped with the AN/SPY-6 radar, built on advanced gallium nitride technology, it operated on a completely different level compared to older systems. The interference flooding the air, the same jamming Russia believed would protect them, barely made a difference. To this radar, it was just background noise. But the ship didn't launch missiles. Instead, it did something far more strategic. It became a central node, a battlefield data hub. Pulling in information from satellites, passive sensors on land, and its own radar, the destroyer fused everything into a single, precise picture. Then, using a secure data link, it transmitted that information directly into the sky. Waiting above, unseen. At 30,000 feet, hidden within dense cloud cover, two F-35 Lightning II fighters were already in position. They emitted nothing. No radar, no signals. Completely silent. Completely invisible. They were only listening. At 8:25, while Russian pilots were still focused on the chaos on their radar screens, convinced they had confused their opponent, the F-35s were calmly observing from a distance. Their systems didn't rely on radio waves. Instead, they used advanced infrared sensors capable of detecting heat with extreme precision. In the freezing Arctic sky, the engines of the Su-35s stood out clearly, like blazing fires against a dark background. Every detail was visible: position, speed, direction, even thermal patterns. All of it was tracked and quietly passed along. And above them, something even more dangerous was already in motion. At 8:28, the next command was issued. From an altitude of 50,000 feet, where the sky begins to darken into deep shades of purple, the F-22 Raptor fighters began their descent. No decoys this time, only precision. Using the energy from their altitude, they accelerated rapidly, diving toward the Russian formation at high speed. Their approach vector targeted a known weak point, above and behind, where detection is hardest. The Russian pilots were still locked onto their screens when it happened. A sudden, violent odor, not from weapons, but from air itself. One of the F-22s streaked overhead at supersonic speed, passing dangerously close. The resulting shockwave slammed into the aircraft like an invisible odor, shaking it hard. Warning systems blared, the cockpit rattled. Instinctively, the pilot looked up, and there it was. A sleek gray F-22, hovering nearby in an aggressive knife-edge maneuver, its wings tilted sharply, holding position with unsettling precision. Then, slowly, its weapons bay opened. Inside, a row of AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles became visible, silent, locked, and ready. No launch, no warning shot, just a message that was impossible to misunderstand. There was no explosion, but the message was unmistakable. I've been here the entire time. I can end this whenever I choose. And you would never see it coming. Trapped by that realization, the two Su-35 pilots shifted into pure survival mode. Afterburners flared, thrust vectoring engaged. The aircraft snapped into extreme angle turns, even attempting the famous Pugachev's Cobra, an aggressive maneuver meant to reverse roles and get behind an opponent. For a brief moment, it felt like a chance to break free. At 8:37, they pushed the aircraft to its limits. But physics didn't cooperate. Those dramatic high-angle maneuvers came at a cost. Speed collapsed almost instantly. The Su-35s lost energy, becoming slow, exposed targets hanging in the sky. Meanwhile, the American fighters never entered that trap. The F-16 Fighting Falcon and F-22 Raptor maintained distance, refusing to chase the same vertical game. With constant updates flowing through secure data networks like Link 16, they simply adjusted position, staying fast, stable, and out of danger, while tracking everything in real time. From the pilot's perspective, the advantage wasn't just awareness, it was prediction. Helmet-mounted targeting systems stayed locked continuously, while the Su-35s twisted through the sky in desperation. Even when the Russian pilots tried to break the lock, the systems never lost track. The AIM-9X class seekers remained fixed on their targets, unaffected by the chaos, waiting for authorization. The key difference wasn't flying skill, it was information speed. With the combined sensing network, space-based feeds, passive detection, airborne sensors, and the silent coordination of platforms like the USS Jack H. Lucas, DDG-125, the American side was effectively operating a shared real-time awareness system. In that environment, every Russian move was anticipated seconds before it happened. At 9:20, the situation shifted again. No weapons were launched. Instead, the F-22s moved into formation, not to strike, but to control space. They positioned themselves around the Russian aircraft in a disciplined escort pattern, guiding rather than engaging. The Su-35s and Tu-95s were gradually forced to descend and turn back. What began as a high-tension encounter ended as a controlled withdrawal under constant observation. By 11:30, the aircraft had returned to Russian airspace, but the real impact came later. When maintenance crews analyzed the flight data, they discovered something far more significant than the encounter itself. The Su-35's electronic warfare system had been active throughout the entire mission, and every emission had been captured. What Russia used to mask its position had effectively become a source of intelligence for the opposing side. Every frequency shift, every pattern, every signal behavior had been recorded, analyzed, and stored. The conclusion was unavoidable. In modern conflict, visibility is no longer about what you see in the sky. It's about what you emit into it. This engagement wasn't decided by speed or maneuver alone, but by integrated systems, shared awareness, and information dominance. In the end, the decisive factor wasn't firepower. It was data.